I'm Paul Krugman, professor at the City University of New York Graduate Center, writer for the New York Times, here to answer your questions. Yes, so they messed up. They're supposed to have somebody you know call so that you know that it's genuine, and they didn't. It was somebody I didn't know, and I wasn't sure it was real. I thought it might be a prank, so it wasn't until half an hour later that I knew it was real. But I was actually at a conference. I called my wife to tell her, and what she said, because we have a textbook together, and we were working on revisions, and she said, "Oh my God," brief pause, "we don't have time for this," which was true. It was extremely stressful to deal with both the prize and getting that textbook edition out. Oh, it's a funny thing about, Nobels in economics come late in your career, and so the people whose opinion you care about most already know your work. And if they thought your work was good, they don't need the Nobel to tell them that. And if they didn't think your work was good, they think the Nobel Committee made a mistake. So it's kind of odd. Now what does it gives you a lot more public visibility, and you get invited to lots of fancy events. But I don't think it changed my life all that much, because I was already a newspaper columnist. I was already out there in the world. So two things. One is even before the Nobel, I spent a lot of time in meetings that involve a mix of people. I'm parts of various organizations where sort of big players in the financial world, political appointees, and economists meet together. And what I always notice at those meetings is that everyone is dissatisfied. Everybody wants to be what they aren't. The economists want real influence on policy. The politicians are kind of thinking, what's my next job? How do I get rich? And the business people want to be respected for their minds. So everybody wants to be who they aren't. The thing that I've seen, but I haven't met many of the real plutocrats, but one thing I do see is that, yes, they feel powerless. I think in some ways, one thing you do see, you sometimes see very rich people. I mean, Elon Musk is most obvious, but not alone. Very rich people believe in crazy conspiracy theories. And I think part of the reason is that they think that they should be running the world, given how much money they have. Why can't they make things happen the way they want them to? So there must be some dark conspiracy that is preventing them from getting what they want. AI is really hard to figure out, partly because it isn't true AI. This is not a general intelligence, and part of the problem that creates is it doesn't have judgment. It doesn't have the ability to sort out nonsense from real stuff. And so this is why we get ask one of the large language models for an answer to a question, and it will lie. It'll cite. You can ask for your own work, and it will have references to papers you never wrote. So now maybe that's transitional, or maybe that's inherent. It does not look at this point as if it's ready to be a sort of general purpose technology that will replace human beings in a large number of roles. What it does do is it takes some roles. And we don't know yet how big that'll be. It's one version of it is that these models are sort of like a super version of autocorrect, which sounds trivial, except a lot of people's jobs are basically, autocorrect. They say there's a lot of white-collar jobs that are not actually innovative thinking. They are, in fact, sorting through stuff to find errors. The best model we have might be information technology, which did produce a burst of productivity growth from about the mid-1990s to about 2006 or so. It was not transformational, but it did make a significant impact, often in ways that were not sexy at all. So it turned out that probably the biggest productivity gains from networks came in inventory management. And so there will be things like that AI will probably end up doing. I think Friedman would have said that because he believed in mechanical rules for central banking, which is a view that has aged very badly. And it's very hard for me to think that, let's think about policy during COVID. Unprecedented shock. If you had trained AI on historical patterns, which is how you would have trained it, it would have completely been unable to cope with the uniqueness. It actually required a considerable amount of creative thinking to figure out what to do in the face of this unprecedented shock. So I think this is a case where in a way, central banking is going to be one of the harder jobs to automate. I mean, most of the time, yeah, but most of the time it's actually very simple. Most of the time we follow a Taylor rule or something like that. But the times when you really need central bankers are also the times when you're not going to be able to rely on AGI. It is problematic because AI can do a pretty good job of simulating a sort of B or B plus level student essay, right? If it's repetitive and seems a little bit cliched, well, so does a lot of what students write. So it can be a real problem. And at this point, so I'm not having to confront this in a typical environment. What I do in the class that I regularly teach is I ask students to give me, to analyze sort of idiosyncratic country experiences in ways that I think you wouldn't get, I think I would be able to tell if they had just gone to ChatGPT and asked for it. But yeah, I mean, we already know that comments on social media and so on are it is quite hard to tell the people from the bots, and which may say more about the people than the bots, but still, this is always a problem. I'm not that helpful on that. I've never tried to do academic policy. It's a very hard job. If I can say, we do have some information on what works, at least within the United States. There are certain universities that do a much, much better job of promoting upward social mobility than others do. My university happens to be one of them. But mostly it seems to be about having, taking teaching seriously, not charging too much money, and just seeing yourself as having a mission. But other than that, how you do it exactly, I don't know. I mean, put it this way, if there's one person in the world I know who would not make a good university president, it's me. Well, I'm a great believer in incomplete solutions. If you think that we're going to eliminate the great concentration of wealth in the hands of a few, well, we're not going to do that. Not, the revolution is not at hand. Can we raise taxes at the top? Yeah, we can. Can we crack down on tax evasion? Yes. Can we possibly enhance the bargaining power of workers, which will help their wages at the expense of CEOs? Yeah. None of those things by itself is going to be transformative, but it would help. Not clear to me that there are a lot of threats out there to society, and the concentration of income and wealth is one of them. But I'm not sure that it's not your only priority. At least there are plenty of things that require action, and I just want to tax the rich, not so much to make them less rich as to because we need the money. It seems to me that if we accept that many people are very poorly informed about policy choices, which is true, and that's not, you can't really blame them. People have lives to live, children to raise, jobs to do. Then you say that we're going to improve democracy by having these people who are very poorly informed vote directly on policy. I mean, that doesn't improve their information. I mean, there's a reason that the most successful systems have been representative democracy, where people choose people to represent them and become much better informed. Now, that only works up to a point. If they choose very bad, if the people chosen to represent are very bad, then we're in trouble, which we are. But I don't see that. This is not fundamentally a mechanical question. This is not a question of do we alter the rules of the game politically, and that way good policy will result. The problem is that a lot of people believe things that are not true, and there are powerful forces trying to convince them of things that are not true, and that's the problem. First, the orthodox economic answer to climate change is carbon taxes, something like that, and those are regressive, which means that if that was your policy, you would have to try to offset it with increased social benefits or something like that. Basically, a tax on emissions is not just a consumption tax, but one that probably falls most heavily on lower income groups. But we really have two. Part of the answer is if, to the extent that you rely on emissions taxes, then you have to try to offset the distributional impact. But also, it's really clear now that emissions taxes, while a helpful tool, are not going to be the only climate policy tool, and probably not even the main one. Because what we really need to do is push technological change, push green technologies, which have had enormous improvements, and that's industrial policy, not tax policy. And there's no reason why the distributional effects should be harmful. It's if anything, you're creating, you may be creating some jobs in particular sectors. It's a whole different world. The main example we have right now is Biden's Inflation Reduction Act, and that act is, in its distributional consequences, actually at least somewhat positive. It helps lower income workers more than the top. That's kind of the environmental Kuznets curve doctrine, the argument that richer countries take more action to curb pollution because it becomes more of a priority. There's something to that, but I think the main thing to say is, given the environmental threats, that takes too long. We don't have time to raise the developing world to Western European living standards before we start to reduce global emissions. We're already starting to see significant adverse impacts from climate change. It's also, by the way, it's unfortunately not true that rich countries have a strong consensus in favor of environmental policies. There's plenty of people opposing those policies, even in rich countries. So I don't think that's, economic development makes a lot of things possible, but it's not going to solve this problem. Okay, nobody serious in economics thinks that GDP is your sole policy objective. GDP has the advantage of being a very clearly defined measure. There are no value judgments involved in deciding how you measure GDP. There's just a system for doing that. And that's a valuable number to have. A number that is correlated with well-being. If you graph perceived well-being across countries with GDP per capita, there's a clear upward sloping relationship, but it's not perfect. There are a lot of deviations, and there are and so we need to take that into account. I'm not sure that any alternative measure is really going to help you all that much in making policy. And if you look at what I've seen in the data about what besides GDP per capita explains happiness, a little bit work hours. But also, one of the things that really pops out of the data is that speaking Spanish seems to be good for happiness, both within the United States and internationally. Hispanic cultures appear to be happier, and there's probably reasons for that. It's things like family. So that, are we going to say that devise a measure of economic growth that includes the percentage of people who speak Spanish at home. I mean, this is not how we're going to do it. I've never really thought about, but I think I would ask for questions about itself. I think the distinctive feature, I mean, consciousness is mostly about being aware of yourself and not just of external things. And, you know, yeah, you can ask ChatGPT to talk about itself, but it's pretty bad. Look, I mean, we know now that the Turing test doesn't work. It's quite easy now to produce code that will pass the Turing test. So I'm not quite sure what we do now.